So we come now to our media picks of the month. I got a bit of a guilty pleasure one this month, but do you want to share your
Go with your guilty pleasure, because mine's
go with my
probably
guilty
equally
pleasure?
guilty, but and equally a pleasure. But
Well, I've been inspired this month by the release of the trailer for the upcoming Lara Croft Tomb Raider movie. It's coming out next year,
the
and
screen's
so
second best archaeologist.
yes, the screen's second best, and certainly Indiana Jones computer games just don't stack up. So certainly the best computer game archaeologist.
Absolutely.
There's a film coming out next year, and I was inspired to go and play some of the games again, and also, frankly, my media pick of the month was just watching the Lara Croft Tomb Raider movie from 2001. It's just a wonderful bit of, it just captures cinema at that point. It's just so.
This is the Lara Croft
specific.
Tomb Raider movie that was almost universally panned by the critics at the time, if I remember rightly.
It was, but it's kind of beautiful. I mean, when you actually watch, I mean, again, the reason why I think it's so interesting, first of all, from I guess a cinematic history sort of perspective, is that it really, as I say, really captures where Hollywood was at that point, where computer game movie adaptations were at that point, but also where they thought. I think, if you compare it to other films of a similar time, things like the Spider-Man movie and all this kind of thing, you can feel how it is that the filmmakers feel that that basically they're not quite connected to the audience, so they are serving up what they think you should want. Whereas this isn't quite the same today, whereby there's an awful lot more, often quite vicious commentary online, in particular, where people become very aware actually of what audiences want. So I think this is one of the reasons why, for example, the adaptations of lots of the Marvel stories have been so successful, is because actually they're having to take on board lots more audience feedback. You're not just being served something. So there's that, but also actually I really find it interesting the way that, again, it's a really interesting case study of how people think archaeologists use physical artifacts, how people assume archaeologists interact with the past. So Lara Croft Tomb Raider appeals to me on various levels, and obviously there's Angelina Jolie and all that kind of thing, but we don't have to dwell on that.
Although most of the critics did, but
they did. But because I think it's I guess it actually, in some ways, really it highlights a public perception of, in particular, archaeologists and archaeology, and not obviously no one really believes that Tomb Raider is the way that archaeologists behave, but one which essentially is very modernist. This idea that there are answers out there that just have to be found and unlocked, and these will reveal great truths about humanity. It's interesting, isn't it, that a sort of a postmodern world, certainly postmodern in that sense, cinema as well, often feeds up archaeological stories that are all about slotting answers into place in a neat narrative and story.
What I find really interesting about the whole Lara Croft phenomenon, and I'm not as much of a gamer as you are, certainly not the first person type games. I'm more of a strategy and sim geek, I'm afraid. But I think the whole lot. First of all, I think it's really interesting that when that game was created, the team behind it decided that they would put a female hero front and center of the game, which would probably more likely to be played by blokes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But also she's almost directly a tongue-in-cheek sort of pastiche of indie.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, you may be interested to know that when they were first designing the game, what happened was they did in fact design someone that was an indie rip-off. He had a hat, he had a shirt, he had trousers. He was essentially Indiana Jones. And the
copyright lawyers, by any chance?
Well, they were nervous of copyright lawyers, and so they decided to go in the polar opposite. So they turned him into a her, and emphasised the herness with the infamously large boobs.
Yeah.
And But also, as well, actually, what they decided to do was make a virtue of again, a perception of what that meant in terms of, for example, apparently females in their minds were better at gymnastics, and also this was an opportunity to make the player want to look after the character of Lara Croft. You were invested in her as a in a protective way, as opposed to just going on an adventure with Indiana Jones.
Right.
So there were various reasons that they did it, and now I think what's interesting, flash forwarding from the 90s really to now, is that now we're in a situation where Lara Croft is a character who is now spearheading, I suppose, stories of personal growth in computer games, as opposed to simply being a woman. She is a person who is moving through an experience, which, interestingly, this is, I guess, slightly off topic, but there's not that much you can talk about when it comes to Lara Croft Tomb Raider the movie. But interestingly, if you think about it, Indiana Jones doesn't do that. He doesn't really, in the films, have much of a character arc. I mean, it was pointed out on The Big Bang Theory that Raiders of the Lost Ark would have proceeded as it did, whether Indy was involved or not. You know, the Ark would have ended up on that island, the Nazis would have been melted, whether he was there or not. So it's interesting how actually he doesn't have these extraordinary character arcs. He kind of comes in and leaves, maybe with a little bit of esoteric knowledge, but he doesn't really change as a person from adventure to adventure.
That's really interesting. I mean, I think that when it comes to computer games as well, we're obviously now in a situation where the technology that's available to game developers, and particularly some of the game engines that are now available, are capable of so much more development, context, whatever, with it, and more so every year. That kind of personal. You're no longer sat there manipulating a character. You actually are the character within the landscape and the environment of the game.
Well, and I suppose, I guess, knowing what I do of your household, I imagine you would have come across the character of Ezio Auditore da Firenze, the assassin.
Absolutely, and we can't wait for the Egyptian iteration that's coming out next year, I think.
Incidentally, we've been offered a review copy.
Oh, right, okay. I presume we now have to kill each other because we're not supposed to say that, are we?
Oh, no, I can say it. We haven't got it yet. It's not like I'm showing you footage. But the fact that we see that character of Ezio again, you see him from being a teenager through to being an old man, and actually in the extended media, there's a short animation where we see his last days. That's a whole realm of entertainment that, again, I think movies like Lara Croft were the seed of. So in some respects, if this film hadn't happened, I don't think actually you would end up with the rounded stories that we're getting in computer games. If this sort of character if this moment in pop culture history hadn't occurred in the sense of proving that there's an audience, then you wouldn't have got to the point of actually serving the audience's desires, as well as just giving them, image recognition,
Although I think it's interesting though that the generation of game designers that came up with these iconic characters like Ezio and like Lara would be other people who grew up watching Indy and Michael Douglas in Romancing the Stone and the cinematic versions, if you like, or iterations of that kind of storytelling in the late 70s, early 80s. So in a sense, the cinema handed the baton on to the computer designers, you could possibly argue, and then the computer designers were so phenomenally successful that cinema has actually taken up some of these franchises in return and said thank you very much.
Well, and then also, again, slightly off topic, but also on topic, you have experiences such as there's a game called The Last of Us, which you may or may not have heard about.
It's a new one on me.
It's worth looking into. It's a deeply effective and, in some respects, uniquely engageable because of its medium. Human emotional experience. It is, and that's it. Yeah, it's definitely matured, and now, as you say, now it is feeding back into film and so on and so forth. So yeah, as far as the new trailer goes, though, I'm intrigued. Let's just leave it there, I guess. So what's your media pick for the month?
my media pick for the month. We were talking about guilty pleasures. It's a series which in English is going out under the name of Norsemen on Netflix. The original title in Norway, where it comes from, is Vikingane, and it's a treat. It's anybody watching us who likes Scandi noir. This is sort of Scandi comedy noir. It's but it's very interesting. It's very interesting. I mean, in recent years, Scandinavian television has gone global with characters like Wallander and The Killing, and you know, Sarah Lund in The Killing has become a sort of female role model and fashion icon with those Icelandic jumpers and so on. Scandinavian culture is very much a hip thing in London and other places at the moment, and quite properly. And the Scandinavian filmmakers and program makers are started to produce material that is responding to this demand. And Norsemen is it's been described as a cross between Blackadder and Game of Thrones, and I think that's absolutely spot on. I mean, it was created for Norwegian television by two people called Jonas Torgersen and Jonny Helgakær, and it's set in AD 790.
Mm-hmm.
In a village on the coast of Norway, and it opens with a raiding party returning from an unannounced visit down south, with a couple of hostages, including a Roman actor called Rufus, who imports, who over the course of the next number of episodes imports artistic and cultural values to the Northern European Iron Age, which maybe weren't there before he arrived. So, to the extent that the chief of the village appoints him the creative director of the village. It's like all these comedies. It tells us a lot about ourselves as well as about the past, but it's and our views of the past. But the production values are terrific. It's got a lovely cast. It looks fabulous. And it is absolutely dry as dust, rolling on the floor, funny.
Right. I'm almost imagining someone like consulting on. Well, if you want to be, feared as Viking warriors, this is how you do. Like someone consulting on the image of the Viking.
Oh, it has. I mean, you have again. Spoiler alert, but not too much. You have, for example, a holmganging where the one of the protagonists buys poison for his sword. He's not particularly well known as he's not particularly well known or effective swordsman. But it ends up about as well as the duel with the mountain does in Game of Thrones, shall we say.
Okay.
You will never watch a Viking boat funeral depicted on screen again in quite the same way after watching the one that's shown in this particular show. In the, I think the best episode of the first series, which is out, it's out on Netflix at the moment. The second series is being made, and hopefully Netflix have optioned it to show. But my thing is that the best bit of the first series that is available now. Other subscription services are available, but they go raiding in England and put it this way. Spoil the party where a group of monks and Saxon hippies are celebrating the fundraising for the new children's hospital.
Okay, wow.
It's as I say, it's absolutely dry as a desert, funny. It addresses all sorts of modern issues, including angst about sort of sexuality. There is a very funny gag involving rune sticks, and I just go on and on. They know their Viking lore. It looks fantastic. It looks like a period epic, but it's actually talking about us as well. Norsemen on Netflix. It's an absolute treat.
No, that's good. I'm glad to hear it because, frankly, I have seen it. You know, I have seen it. It's come up on TV. You know, the little thumbnail has come up, and I have been avoiding it like the plague because I've been kind of enjoying, as you know, the Vikings on via Amazon, but you know I have to wait until it's on DVD. And the only thing I'd seen on Netflix trying to sort of get that kind of fix was a film called The Northman.
There is a confusion. If you Google it, it does get poor old Google a bit confused.
Yeah. So this film, The Northmen, is atrocious.
So I hear.
It is terrible, and I mean, it could not be worse. It could be worse, but not much by much. And so I'd been because of name association, I've been going, oh, the Norsemen, that's going to be terrible as well. But I'll give it a go. That sounds like it's actually, you know, right. It's almost like the anti-Vikings TV series. It sounds brilliant.
I think that's actually a pretty good way of putting it. But as I say, it's unique and of itself as well. Although there is again a very good homage to Spinal Tap, shall we say?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sold. I'm sold. I'm going to go and watch it. In fact, let's bring this to a close so I can go and watch it.
I think that's a very good
idea. But nonetheless, I think this month, even though you're chomping at the bit to get into October in terms of news, I think we've managed to have some very interesting conversations here, and hopefully, people will comment below. In particular, actually, I'm looking forward to seeing what people make of some of the conversations surrounding, for example, you know. The use of animals and burials, and also actually this stuff surrounding planning, and I said this tension between who owns the past. I think is an ongoing conversation that I'm happy to return to. But as ever, thank you so much for your time, Andy, and I guess we'll meet once again next month.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, we'll meet again with Common Porpoise.
We will. I can't top that. Anyway, guys, as ever, until next time, take care. Bye-bye.